I'm really pleased to introduce tonight's talk on greening golf courses. We have a dual speaker tonight, Jennifer and Francis O'Donnell, both of whom have really interesting resume. Jennifer has a master's degree in urban planning and real estate development from Columbia University's Graduate School of Architecture, Planning, and Preservation. She was a US delegate to UNESCO's Integrated Territorial and Urban Conservation Program in Rhone, and continues to study and teach sustainable development as a longtime learner and educator. She's currently an urban and regional planner with an expertise in conservation, environment, climate adaptation, and sustainability issues from both a global and local perspective. Francis studied agriculture at the University of Delaware before embarking on a 25-year career as a farmer on Maryland's very beautiful Eastern Shore, where, among other things, he oversaw a 1,000-acre farm, a diversified operation growing grains and produce. He was involved with orchards, forestry, tidal wetlands, and game preserve. His work was recognized in the 1980s as a model for best management practices by the Chesapeake Bay Commission, and that is a big deal. They have recently returned to the Hudson Valley, where I guess Francis grew up. And together in 2021, they purchased the Stone Dock golf course and committed them to not only restoring the course, but doing it through sustainable practices. So with that, Jennifer and Francis, it's over to you.
Thank you so much. We're going to thank you for that introduction. We're going to give you an overview. I will be doing more of the overview, and Francis is more of the practitioner expert in the growing game. So I will be providing the background and the sort of big picture. I work as the CEO of the golf course, and Francis works as the COO. So this is actually a picture of our third green, and I can see why I can't advance it. There we go. And I will skip our background. So in this presentation, we'll just talk a bit about Stone Dock and our approach. We'll talk a little bit about sustainability in golf, and then I'll let Francis get to the specific measures that we're doing in soil and water conservation, which he has a significant expertise in. We envision that a golf course, and our golf course in particular, can be in harmony with nature and the community, and we see it as a healthy place to gather and play for future generations. So our goal is really to help Stone Dock weather climate change and to also deal with the kind of erosion that it faces sitting in the floodplain of the Rondout Creek. I just want to start with this picture because it shows you how land uses change. It's a view from Mohonk from a 1930s colored postcard. And you can see in the distance the Rondout Valley, and in the middle of that, I don't know if you can see my cursor, probably not, there is Stone Dock. There's a little U in the creek right there. If you go to the next postcard, suddenly so much of it has been overtaken again by trees. And this is just an interesting, and you can see Stone Dock also in there. It's a little bit different perspective, but it is one of the green patches, the light green patches. And what it shows you is that land uses change constantly and have changed significantly over the last century. This is Stone Dock, and for those of you who are not familiar, we are surrounded by Rondout Creek by 4,830 feet of shoreline, and we have 68 acres that we care for, 49 of which belong to us, and 19 which belong to the houses along Stone Dock Road. We have the easement of the 200 feet behind their homes, which we take care of as part of the golf course, and they actually are part of the 7th, 8th, and 9th greens. I'm also just going to show you a little bit more about the golf course and its setting. We have significant biodiversity, as does much of the land around us. We're in the shadow of the gunks, and so there are we are in a biodiversity hotspot, one could say, and we also have fresh water and we have state and federal wetlands surrounding and flowing through the course. We're also sitting on the top of an aquifer, which is very plentiful, and it is our fresh water as well as the fresh water for all of the homes on the creek. And we had some discussions during the Environmental Commission meeting about how plentiful that aquifer is, partly potentially because of the leaks in the Ashokan Reservoir. So you can actually see what look like artesian wells sprouting up from the lawns of the houses. What this means is that wetlands and water are overtaking the lower part of the course. The course sits in a plateau, and you can see if you look at this view of the floodplain, you can see where our plateau is. The little red roof being on Stone Dock Road being the clubhouse. It's right in the middle of the picture. And then looking down over the course, which is a majority, about 70% of it is in the floodplain. So this is a picture we'll come back to a little later. It shows some of our calculations. We spent a lot of time thinking about how to rewild the course, although it's challenging to do that when you have traditional golfers who don't like to have deep rough or even deeper fescue or native grasses or wild grasses. They want a very easy playing surface. And a lot of golf courses have moved into making golf courses more competitive by actually narrowing fairways, reducing rough, increasing rough, increasing the height of grasses, and so forth. But what you can see in this picture is that we've calculated how much acreage we have in greens, which is really only just over an acre, and how we have a number of acres, as you had asked before we started, in buffer along the creek, about 60 feet of that. Plus we have planted trees for tribs, about 2/3 of an acre. And we have about 11.5 acres just in wooded areas. So as Alan said, we purchased it during in 2021, and this was during the pandemic. It faced many challenges, including greens that were significantly degraded, partly because the owner was unable to return from Florida during that time, and partly because Stone Dock had fallen into some decline over the previous years. And during this time, we have rebuilt and resodded greens. Francis will talk about changing some of the varieties of grasses that we use to be more sustainable. We've worked on slowing erosion through the work we're doing with drainage and irrigation work. We've rebuilt all of our major equipment, which is no small feat for a small public golf course. We've updated the clubhouse and the cafe and pro shop. And we've done landscaping around the parking lot, and we've planted hundreds of new trees and shrubs with the help from the Trees for Tribs program. So here's an example of how they are growing up very healthy through the 350 tubes that you see along the shoreline. And the Trees for Tribs program, we'll talk a little bit more about that later too. So this is just introductory. But you can see along the edges of the course that we have hundreds of these white tubes. We also have, in addition to losing a number of emerald ash ash trees from the emerald ash borer, we face the potential threat of the Eurasian bark beetle on our iconic, very tall Norway spruce trees that Tommy Davenport planted to define the fairways on his family's farm. I meant to say that Tommy Davenport, a member of the Davenport family, built the course from a cornfield in 1969. And these trees were little baby Christmas trees at the time. And so this course not only sits in lush farmland, prime farmlands, but it also, as I said, is the rich bottom soil and floodplain. So one of the things we're looking at, for example, are how to supplant the Norway spruce, and we're experimenting with several hundred, I think, of these loblolly and pitch pines, which we bought from the Maryland Department of Conservation, because if you go Maryland and south, you will see loblolly and pitch pines throughout the east coast of the United States. So our goal, even though it's a challenge for a course with a small budget, is to be committed to environmental stewardship for the courses that aren't famous or have big budgets. We use organic methods on the majority of our turf, and we will talk about the exceptions. We have a new program for planting, as I mentioned, and our goal is to protect the watershed and protect the land for future generations. We've also done work in the clubhouse that reflects these values. We did the construction ourselves, and I know through my work in architecture about the environmental standards of LEED for existing buildings. So we've also utilized all local upcycled materials, with the exception of the floor, which is a commercial flooring, but it has no VOCs. We follow our energy best practices to the greatest extent that we can. And as I said, only low and no VOC products. We also put in 4 EV charging stations, but we can talk about that later. It has been a challenge getting the transformers to get them up and running. This summer, we're going to be installing solar, increased insulation, and HVAC upgrades with the help of funds from NYSERDA and USDA. Another topic, which is a challenge, because for the layperson, I've worked in government for a long time, getting these grants is a lot of paperwork. So just to give you a little overview, there are over 38,000 golf courses in the world, and the United States has about 42% of them. And just give me 1 second. About 20% of them have implemented some form of sustainable program. The reason for this is not just cosmetic. Superintendents are trained as landscape managers, and their goal is to make sure that the vegetation is going to survive, not just look pretty. So although there was a really big boom in the green revolution of using pesticides, this is on the wane. And it is because the vegetation can't really withstand the onslaught of chemical treatments. But there are still many courses that do so. So sustainable golf course management is a trend worldwide, with the leading organization being GEO. It's in Europe, and they are not only the advocate for greener golf courses in Europe, but they are setting standards by working with the protocols of the United Nations, such as the Kyoto Protocol, to help governments change their regulations on water usage, pesticide usage, and so forth. In the United States, it's more of a voluntary thing. The Audubon Society, for example, has a program where courses can get certified, and the USGA is also following this closely. But New York is a leader in best management practices because the New York Golf Course Foundation has a program called Best Management Practices that they're working on with Cornell Cooperative Extension. And what they do is they not only present the research and do research together with state government, the DEC, and so forth, they also advocate for policy changes and they work closely with course superintendents to implement them. So these are some of the areas: water management, nutrient management, pest management, wildlife and habitat management, energy efficiency, and waste management. So all of these different life cycle issues on courses are addressed by this very robust program, which you can see and you can find online, is connected to Cornell and has started to lead the way and serve as a model for other states. So at Stone Dock, now we're going to get into some of our work. We'll focus, although I talked about a lot of things that we're doing, we'll focus on our water conservation efforts, the integrated pest management program, and our Trees for Tribs program. This is a startling statistic. Approximately and only about 12% of golf courses in the United States use recycled or reclaimed water for irrigation, like we do. So we draw from the Rondout Creek, and we do that through the water withdrawals program in New York State. We have to report the water that we utilize, and as long as it's not over 100,000 a day, within a 30-day period, we are entitled to withdraw water from the course, which returns back to, from the creek, which returns back to the creek. And we report that every year to the DEC. But 88% of the courses are using potable water. They're using drinking water from public water supplies. So this is one of the reasons that golf courses get a bad name. And it's also one of the reasons that we have to start moving away from using as much water on golf courses as we do. This is just a really cute project. We, as I showed you, are in a floodplain, and some of our members took it upon themselves to take what was once the deck of a house that floated off during Irene and put it back on the course as a bridge. That was built by the Good Enough Construction Company. So again, just to show you, that's our floodplain. One of the first things that you have to consider when you're doing water management is green infrastructure. So what is green infrastructure? Well, it's anything that allows water to drain in place rather than flowing over the land. So the first thing we did when we got to the course was we started taking out any and all asphalt. You won't find any on the course anymore, so that the water could drain everywhere. And this was in our cart plaza. We also chose to never pave the parking lot because we feel that strongly that that should be also a site for green infrastructure, and eventually we will develop more elaborate rain gardens there. One of the things that the town of Marbletown did for us was they helped build culverts on the edge of our parking lot so that we could make it safer to enter, and also plant gardens around the edges. So that's what you see here. And these are examples of the Norway spruce that we hope will grow up and potentially help us if we have to save some of our old majestic Norway spruce trees. So now I'm going to have Francis, I'm going to turn it over to Francis. He's going to talk about all the work that we've been doing in irrigation infrastructure.
When you're talking about managing water on land, and the land has been designated and selected for use as a golf course, water is a very important subject. Water, without it, of course, we can't survive. But It can also be excessive, so drainage is always an important subject for us. So we're constantly monitoring what we're doing with drainage systems, mostly which are naturally occurring. The natural contouring and shaping of the topography of the land that we have, the flow. Some of this is completely natural. Some of this is man-made. I'm convinced that there are a couple of hydraulic issues that take place on our golf course that date back to the building of the D&H Canal, where water was redirected. And so here we are, 150 years later, and that now leads to what we have to consider. But the picture that you see on your screen, that is a line that we installed. This is not for drainage, but rather for the irrigation. And this is one of these subjects, if you're going to do something, you have to be all in doing it. And so to try to grow turf for a golf course without an adequate supply of water is really creating a bad scenario of events that can take place, because you have the regular, in that environment, you would have the regular breaking of cycles. You have to also remember that what we produce is really dictated to us by the golf industry and people that play the sport. So for the reason you see this line that we're installing was to get an adequate amount of water so that we wouldn't find ourselves doing things over and over and over in basically broken systems.
Just so you understand, also, Stone Dock is, again, a sort of working person's local golf course, and is very affordable and accessible. So in order to maintain the budget that we have, we do all the contracting of the work for ourselves. So we actually brought the people to the site who typically are hired to join these pipes together. And for pennies on the dollar, we were able to build a system that for most courses might cost
hundreds and hundreds of thousands
of dollars. I also just wanted to mention, this is the plateau where there was inadequate irrigation infrastructure, which meant that if we wanted to supply water to this area, we would have been tapping into the aquifer. So what we're doing here is we're using reclaimed water instead of drinking water as a result.
And you'll also see just in the center left of that picture, you see a body of water, and we have just a tremendous volume of water that passes from all of the surrounding areas, passes right through the center of the golf course itself. And that was, it's networked together. It dates back to its agricultural days when it was a functioning farm. There were ditches that were probably installed and ponds that were probably dug at that time. And all of those really serve as wonderful, wonderful sediment traps. So we're actually the beneficiary of a lot of upstream erosion that has to pass across us, because we provide bodies of water that, as that water is moving, the velocity is slowed down significantly and the precipitants drop out. It does on occasion call for some maintenance, but that's a very, very sporadic and only an absolute necessity part of our operation. So
We'll move to the next slide.
yeah, we wanted to talk about integrated pest management, I think.
Oh, no, that's a little bit later.
Okay.
So we're just showing a few more examples of the work that we do ourselves. In addition to the irrigation infrastructure, there's a lot of drainage infrastructure that we're building as a way of avoiding certain flows of water that Francis was talking about, degrading the surface and causing further erosion on the course. So, and this also relates to the Trees for Tribs program. our shorelines are eroding, and we can see we can follow the path across the course, exactly where the water is washing over the course and bringing sediment into the creek. So one of the things that Francis did was identify those locations and build drainage infrastructure on site that would prevent that kind of erosion. Here's just another example of actually an irrigation line to the 7th green. It's just you can see that the houses on the course, by the way, this one here in the corner is in the floodplain to the point that it floods halfway up the kitchen cabinet. So Francis is going to talk also a little bit about deep watering, although we didn't put a picture here.
Sure. Well, deep watering, what we're talking about with deep watering is a practice that we're quite involved in at this very moment because of the very high temperatures that we're dealing with. We've had an incredibly beautiful spring and start to our season where our requirements for irrigation were almost non-existent. We were fortunate to have beautiful temperatures, adequate rainfall. We had done the cultural practices for our very highly managed turf, which is the greens, that we were able to, this is an important part of what we're trying to do. We're trying to develop strong, healthy plant systems that are able to sustain themselves through the high stress periods. So I want to go back to the subject of we're discussing the deep watering. Well, it's very simple. We don't irrigate our greens or any part of our golf course with an automated system that comes on at 4 o'clock in the morning and routinely provides small quantities of water. What we do is we allow plants to develop stronger, healthier root systems by creating natural stresses. And this is implement cultural practices where when we're irrigating green, we actually do most of our irrigation with a combination of overhead and hoses where we apply rather healthy amounts of water, but much less frequency. In other words, if we water a green, now at this time of the year in extreme heat, we may be watering a green every 2nd or 3rd day. But we went the entire spring with not having to irrigate at all. And of course, our problem last year was excessive rainfall. That's where contouring is very important, what we do for drainage off of the greens themselves. But we like to replenish the plant's water requirement all at one time, allow the plant to have adequate water to fully recharge its system, and then we back away and we let that water last as long as it possibly can until we create a stress. The stress creates better root growth, and then the system starts again.
So the other area that we wanted to talk about, and we can go into plant growth and plant varieties, something that Francis left out from his discussion but had in his notes, has to do with the fact that we are trying to change the species of grass that we grow to have more, not only deeper root systems and drought resistant, but also to be less susceptible to attack by insects. And one of the main enemies of the green on the golf course, which is really your biggest investment, is the weevil. And we'll get into that a little bit after Francis talks about integrated pest management and what it is.
So most of you are somewhat familiar with integrated pest management. Anyone?
Yes.
Okay. Well, what for myself, my beginning to understand integrated pest management took place when I was finding myself as a young farmer exposed to a lot of conventional agriculture, and that's the age where chemistry was really at the forefront, and it was what was leading to all of these changes that were taking place and things that we're now trying to do, recognizing that chemical control in a cropping system is a small but important part of the production of plants. So integrated pest management takes into consideration all of the acquired knowledge that we have throughout the history of agriculture and growing plants, from its genetic condition to the biological conditions that we're dealing with, the physical and mechanical. When I say physical and mechanical, the implications of, for example, equipment on a piece of land, for example, creating compression or creating compacted soils that are very difficult to grow. So we have to, for example, in our greens, we have to do what are known as aeration practices, where we open up the soil so that it can have an opportunity to better absorb water and nutrients and develop plants that have root systems that are also able to do the same thing. Now that's kind of ties into the cultural sanitation.
I also, one of the things that that we understand about good aeration practices, that good aeration practices also improve the ability of the plant and the turf to accept any type of treatment without leaching. So for example, if you need to address a pest and you are dealing with turf that's compacted and not accepting, it tends to leach off and run off into the creek. But if you are dealing with a healthy turf situation that's well aerated, you end up with very little runoff. And it's these mostly foliar applications are accepted completely by the plant and have, from what we have learned about the chemistry that we do have to use, and only on the greens, by the way, is that there's a very short half-life for the majority of the things that are being used. But on the golf course in general, we in the majority of the 49 acres, actually 68 acres that we take care of, less than 1 acre ever gets that kind of treatment. And we are using only natural fertilizers. In other words, we're using, what are we using?
Manure.
Chicken shit.
Yeah, chicken shit. That's right. I'm trying to get my thought back here on where we were. Oh, I was talking about the health of the integrated pest management. Okay, and one of the most important things that we can do is to understand what it is, what our impact is on the soil and on the water systems, watersheds, and it begins with the most fundamental basic things. What's going on in the soil? What do we know about the soil? And far too many times in the golf industry, young superintendents are being led by industry that's telling them what to buy, what to apply, when to apply it, and how to keep up with their neighbors. And what we really need to be doing is looking at what's going to make a healthy environment. And for us, it begins with soil testing and generally pH adjustments, which it would be very foolish to be spending $100 on fertilizer without any idea of what your pH is, because if your pH is incorrect, and very often that can be the case, you may only get 20% of that $100 value, as opposed to the very inexpensive cost of lime applications, adjusting the pH to a point where the soil nutrients that are already there are made available to the plants really almost naturally, without even the need for the application of fertilizer, commercial fertilizers. So that applies also. But one of the things that I found fascinating myself, and I was in the poultry business for a very long time, that poultry manure is actually a very good contributor for pH adjustment. At least in our case, we had low pHs, so we needed to raise those.
The level of the pH in the soil is what helps the plant accept the nutrients in the soil. And so part of what we do is really a lot of testing and analysis. Here's an example of Olga Kostromicka coming over to us for free from the University of Massachusetts extension program to help us analyze the presence of weevils on our greens. Weevils are little beetles that plant in the roots of the Poa annua grass. And before you discover them there, it's too late and they can really destroy the green. So part of what we're talking about here is really taking a very measured and scientific approach to looking for the larvae, looking for the small hatches of beetles, and being able to address it very, very early with very, very limited amounts of pesticides. There are also potentially ways of addressing this with natural combatants like the beneficial nematodes, which are a kind of, what is it, a worm, right?
Yeah, there's thousands of microscopic worms.
Yeah. So, but a lot of what happens here is if your soil isn't healthy, then it gets out of whack and you end up with this kind of situation where the ecosystem is not in balance. So getting to the point of having to do the beneficial nematode introduction is really far down the road. I want to talk a little bit, and there'll be time for questions and answers. I want to talk a little bit about our Trees for Tribs program, which may seem on the surface of it like just planting trees, but really it's about a very integrated approach to soil, habitat, erosion, sediment, and a number of other controls on a shoreline and on a landscape. So we were very lucky to have neighbors and friends who recommended the program to us. And I worked together with several people from the DEC and also Laura Feinstone. She brought a bunch of people. There were volunteers that Melissa Everett organized. And there were even AmeriCorps volunteers who came to help us, as well as people from the community. We were able to plant in the space of 2 days, 350 trees and shrubs along our shoreline. And we're proud to report doing very, very well. And what you can see down there is soil that has actually eroded. And think about it this way. It's eroded not only because of what has happened on the golf course, it has eroded from a century of stress through monocultural agricultural practices, because we have no way of knowing what kinds of pesticides and practices were used on the course during the Green Revolution and the period prior to the golf course being in place. So to some extent, one could argue that what we are doing on the course with the diversity of planting is healthier for the soil than what was there before. But along the shoreline, where there's a lot of runoff and not a balance of pH, we have been adding lime, and these trees are also helping to restore the soil. So you can see 1,000 new trees, about 350 from the Trees for Tribs program along our shoreline. And you can also notice the dip in the landscape toward the water. And that is all about the erosion of the landscape from the runoff on the course over time. So you can see how healthy they are. And this is from this year. And sorry, that's just an example of, again, of the pitch pine. No, this is the loblolly pine. So we just want to give you a few examples of courses that are very famous for doing the kinds of things that we would like to do. But in the case of the US Open's most recent location, Pinehurst, which is very famous now for its sustainability. You can see the before and after pictures here. They are rewilding about 40% of their landscape, and they can do so partly because they are sort of a showcase course. They also have a course that doesn't have the wilding on it. Just to be very clear, they have two courses, one which is rewilding and one which is not, but it's very much in the forefront of the public eye because it's the first time that the PGA held the women's and the men's championships in the same course. So this has been, and this is a very important part of golf course sustainability, is the public needs to know about it. It can serve as an example. So when we share with people what we're doing on the course, they take it away and they recognize the value of it. In fact, 96% of all golf course customers say they would prefer to play on a course that is using sustainable practices. And that's from a survey that was done by the USGA and its partners, US Golf Association. Here's another example of what they're doing at Pinehurst. They also, by the way, get millions of dollars in sponsorships because they are a television golf course. So when you see perfect golf courses or perfectly sustainable golf courses in the news, you have to understand that they have mega budgets. Another example of this is the Vineyard Golf Club in Martha's Vineyard, where the neighbors didn't want a speck of anything that wasn't organic, and they're willing to pay for it to the tune of six-figure, I think, maybe even $1 million initiation fee to join the course. So they are the foremost course in America for using all organic methods. But you see that can be a very costly endeavor. So just to come back to the story of Stone Dock, with our much smaller budget, we are trying to do it all ourselves with a very small crew, with equipment that we repair ourselves, with buildings that we restore ourselves, with infrastructure that we build ourselves, and with methods that we understand ourselves. So this, coming back to this map, you can see that what we're doing is we're trying to measure where we are wilding, where we are protecting, where we must treat at all, if at all, with integrated pest management, and also where we're going to go next to make the landscape even more sustainable. Here's just a nice picture from that area looking toward Mohonk, where you can see we only mow this once a year, and we have now 3 acres of that, but we expect to have more going into the future, where we can find ways to train our public to accept this kind of golf. So now we're at the question and answer period of our program, and I hope that you'll be able to hear us when we answer you.
You want to ask your question?
Amen.
Go ahead.
So I'm very impressed with what you're doing for the non-golfers among us. Are there ways that we can either benefit or share the practices that you're promoting with the community?
Well, one thing that we would like to do is we had reached out to Cornell Cooperative Extension to develop a Master Gardeners program on the course. It would not be about them giving us teachers. Normally the Master Gardeners teach courses or come to places and help to set up the landscape. We want to become a site where we do Master Gardener teaching, and we want it to become a learning center for that. So our goal is to create something of a series where people can attend and learn about these kinds of practices. We're not there yet though, because they haven't helped me set it up yet. I'm hoping that they will, and that we'll work together to do that.
I have a comment about this. I hope that in the exposure that people get to some of the practices when they come to the course, that they actually take these things home to their own properties, their own homes, their own communities, and look at how they're really managing that, because that's far more land than the little bit that we're taking care of. Is your whole yard nothing but grass, and are you fertilizing all the grass unnecessarily? I was on that Chesapeake Bay cleanup program and recognized, for it's a long story, I do take a lot of pride for having been involved in that, but there were 3 segment groups that were contributors of pollutants in the Chesapeake Bay. Those were farming, municipalities, okay, and residential communities. Well, and industry. Municipalities and residential were sort of combined as one, but that was the #1 contributor, far, far more than agriculture. And it was because of the use of homeowners going and getting on a program and applying way too much fertilizer to the yards. And those were the true pollutants that killed the Chesapeake Bay.
Yeah.
Those were the #1, you know, everybody was a participant.
Right. So that's a very good point regarding what the Marbletown Environmental Commission might be focused on. I know that there has been a focus in Long Island to go pesticide free because of the incredible cancer clusters in the aquifers, in the areas that draw from the aquifers on Long Island. And I think it would be a good idea for us to talk about that further. That's a great question. Alan Newman, is that your partner in the room?
Yes, that's my wife, Wendy.
Okay, hi Wendy, nice to
Hi.
meet you. Yeah, so also we are very vocal about what we're doing at Stone Dock, and we try to share it with people. Anybody who, even if they won't listen, we tell them about it. So I also do recommend that people look at the best management practices that I put up on this presentation, because it's very, very informative. It's really great leadership by Cornell in New York State.
Yeah, I'm also wondering if at your restaurant you share some information about what you're doing. I think it's very exciting.
We intend to, we both work about 110 hours a week,
Yeah, I
and
know.
we make our staff work about 55 hours a week each. You know, they're willing, they are potential shareholders with us.
Invaluable.
Invaluable, and stakeholders of our business. But we posted the Trees for Trib sign. We put it up on our website, what we're doing. And I would like to make some posters in the restaurant, but thank you for the reminder.
Well, and
Yeah, Michael's got his hand up.
Yeah,
Michael?
hi. It was an excellent presentation, very engaging, very informative.
Thank you.
I'm not a golfer, but if I was coming into Ulster County from outside the area and wanted to golf, what I would want to know is there some kind of organization that rates golf courses for their use of sustainable practices? And I would go to the one that was, you know, most sustainable. Is there such an organization in Ulster County or in New York?
It's really not that organized yet. I wish it were. There were several sort of false starts in New York State in the last couple of decades, with golf courses trying to promote their green practices, but it hasn't really taken off yet.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any organization that rates courses that way. Ratings, yes, but not on those standards.
I mean, it's basically Audubon. But there aren't any Audubon rated courses in Ulster County, although if any of you who remember the old Bel Air project, they were proposing a completely green golf course there, and they had to, because they were in the New York City watershed.
funny.
They had to because you tailed off there.
Because they were in the New York City watershed and they wouldn't have
Oh,
been
I see,
allowed to
I see.
build it anyway.
I see, okay.
There would have been a lot of complaints about that. There also, so as far as a rating system, I think it would be a wonderful thing to get started. And I wish that golf courses could be promoted based on how sustainable they are. We'll look
I could-
into it. It's a great idea. Yes, John.
I don't know how to turn on my my hand on the screen, so I'll just go like this. Why did you decide to buy this golf course?
Well, it's a long family story. Um, I grew up at 12 or 13 years old, growing up in a small city, Kingston. My father was an attorney, joined a private golf course. I liked playing the game. And the other side of the family was out of New York City and decided to retire and ultimately become a farmer. And at a very young age, I was exposed to the farming and the challenges of it. As you saw in the earlier presentation, my background, 1,000 acres down in Chesapeake Bay area. Yeah, 1,000 acres down in the Chesapeake Bay area region. In a diversified operation exposes you to a lot of practices, to a lot of cultural controversy, to a lot of questions that any individual has to answer for themselves about how you want to be a participant in producing something when you're in interaction with nature. And so I ended up back here. My mother was actually a partner with the former owner of the golf course, and it was I think my mother's hope that I would bring everything that I had spent my career learning to Stone Dock and to what she loved, and so that's what we've tried to do. And
Oh, I just want to say, I saw that the course had great potential for something like what we're talking about. And as an urban planner, environmental planner, I said to Francis, I'm only really willing to help you if we can turn this into something that is about learning sustainability.
right, it's exciting.
Nice.
I have a question. I wonder how climate change has affected your plans for restoring the golf course.
It from what we're seeing in climate change, it only re-intensifies our focus on what we're doing, because it becomes even more important. The focus on last year, we had an exceptionally wet year.
And also from the fires out west, we had days where it was not playable. The air quality was so poor. So it was very biblical last season with, fire and hail and locusts and you name it, we had it. Flood. It was a crazy season last year. It really reinforced that the Northeast is wetter, that rainfall is more intense, that it can be shorter, but it causes more degradation of the topsoil. So everything that we know about climate change is being played out on this very small stage and affecting its health. So really what we need to take is a landscape approach, and that landscape approach includes all the things that we just talked about and much more. We could talk about the landscape approach another time, because that's part of what I studied with the United Nations Environmental Program. A landscape approach includes people. It includes creating a place that is a site of learning so that people do take the lessons away with them and value the landscape more.
So has it affected your choice of plantings, for example, or?
Yes.
Absolutely.
You're using native plants for the riparian buffer, at least?
Yeah, so the Trees for Trips program is all native plants and shrubs, and the whole idea is that it also helps not only the soil, but also helps the habitats. For example, bushes that help breed butterflies, help pollinate, or pollinators for bees. The bluegrass being replaced by bent grass, which is much more drought resistant and pest resistant.
Sure, that's right, that's right. I wanted to talk also about just briefly, the thought came to mind as this question came up about climate change. Technology is with us. My gosh, look at what we're doing right now tonight. And so we're looking, this past winter, we spent a little bit of time looking at autonomous mowing. And this will be fantastic. It will move us away from fossil fuel machines to machines that can be powered by clean energy sources. And we'll still need people. The people will have to use the brains and the technology that are given to them. But the production efficiencies of clearance and tolerances and production means and the amount of friction that it takes to cut a blade of grass. The new machines will be using razor blades for cutting the grass.
That's right.
That's what really.
We didn't talk about autonomous mowers, but I did share that information. I know that Tom Conrad is recommending an experiment with the town. Can you hear me? To use,
Yeah, now you're
to
clear.
use those autonomous mowers. One is not terribly expensive, but a fleet can really can set you back something. So what we have to do is hopefully advocate for these to be subsidized with more grant money. For example, did you know that there are no subsidies for switching from gas golf carts to electric golf carts? So this is a problem. The policy is sort of lagging behind. It's also extremely painful. We talked about this. I talked about this earlier. Extremely painful to spend as much time as I'm spending trying to get the subsidies to go with renewables. It's incredibly difficult for the working small business to find their way through all the bureaucracy to get the low interest loans and grants that are necessary to get renewable energy going. So these are, some of the challenges that we're facing with climate change, and that we're trying to address. But regarding plants, yes, every decision we make is to utilize plants that are more adaptable and resilient.
It seems to me like it's more of a labor of love than a profitable undertaking. So,
Francis,
it's up to you
I'm sorry.
guys.
I'm sorry, Francis, I have a question. Why is it that you implied that a sharper mower blade was more ecological? Why is that the case, if that is the case?
Well,
What's the question?
that a sharper mower blade was more ecological. Okay, because a dull blade creates there's a lot of things that happen. For example, those chemicals that we have to apply, with a good clean cut on a plant, you get healthy healing and much less disease pressure. So people in the golf industry, prior to autonomous mowers, high-end courses, one of the most valuable people on their staff is the person in the shop who's keeping the equipment serviced and sharp, so that you end up with clean cuts for quickly healing plants to minimize, and then you get into just basic physics of friction.
Are there other questions for Jennifer or Francis?
Where did you get, what does this diagram, where did you get that and what does that mean to you?
Good question.
What means to us?
This diagram.
This diagram for Q&A that
Oh,
where did
it
that-
was,
what does it mean?
well, I don't know. It's a combination of some kind of a graphic that was generated by my PowerPoint and something that felt a little bit like a screwy what do you call that? Elevation model.
It's like at the bottom.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like it was, yeah, but I had some fun, I just thought it was fun with graphics.
Okay.
It looks like a golf course version of a black hole.
Yeah.
Or it's, I was kind of thinking it was a sand trap. But,
So, I really do appreciate, we really do appreciate the opportunity to share this with you. It is definitely not, because we're, master promoters, for sure. What we're doing is a labor of love, and we do it because we really believe in sustainability. And we would welcome any interaction and involvement that you would want to bring to the work we're doing. I like the suggestions we've been getting, so thank you.
Yes, thank you both. Thank you all.
I have one
Oh,
last
thank
thing.
you for a great talk. And I would point out that even if you're not a golfer, there's a restaurant that you can go have lunch and check out the golf course.
It's even open. Wait, John had another question, but I just wanted to say it's probably the only one in the area that's open on Sunday night and Monday.
Ooh, all right.
Yay! We're closed on Wednesday like everybody else because our cook needs a break.
Yeah.
John, you were
Yeah, I did. Oh yeah, I was just curious. I don't know if you cover this or not. How many other green golf courses are there in Ulster County? Like, I just wonder how special High Falls really is.
I don't want to say that I know the answer to that because there are definitely other golf courses that are utilizing good practices. For example, I know that Innis has planted a lot of native grasses, and I'm not sure
Mohonk,
who
do you
else.
think Mohonk is Mohonk green?
I would say yes to that.
Yes.
Mohawk is, yeah, I've known the superintendents up there and I'm familiar with their course and their approach. And yes, they're a pretty good model for sustainability in the golf industry.
And of course, they are because they're a part of the Smiley family's
Yeah.
larger environmental understanding and approach to that landscape. That makes complete sense. It's a good question. I would really like to find out more about that as well. So,
Golf courses,
soon. Hmm?
Go ahead, ask your
are
question.
there any public golf courses that are using these or similar practices?
Using what?
These are similar practices.
Public
Yes,
golf courses.
I've been trying to find golf courses with as small a budget as ours, and I haven't really found one that is a leader in this, which is one of the reasons that we are doing this, because our goal is potentially to be able to provide the little engine that could story about what we're doing and help other golf courses find very economical ways to adapt. Because it's a really good question, because a part of this is, what is the low hanging fruit? What do you need to address first? How do you deal with plant stress and water, reharvesting and all of the things that should be should be available to you as a golf course. And how do you do it in a way that's going to then yield more results that you can then reinvest in? So that's really the goal of this work that we're doing, is to be a model.
Here in New York State, I think Cornell has a very strong turf program, and I think they're very, very involved in this understanding and this providing of information. So there's some very, very good podcasts and available information on through their internet sites, providing the latest and greatest information that's part of their programs.
So if you do go back to the slide where we showed you the best management practices there for New York State golf courses, I will look into this and find out, but I haven't come across one as small as ours that's doing this.
Yeah, it's great to know. I'm just gonna say one last thing here because I know it's getting late. But you know, these small heart-oriented businesses like yours, we've had several of these before, and next month is Treadlight Farms. It's the same thing. They're light years ahead of other farmers. And they're not doing it for the money. They're doing it because they honestly believe in the environment. So thank you guys for presenting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy to promote you.
Appreciate your time.
And thank you for a great presentation.
Guys.